humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 229, and I had a conversation with Eric Jones. He's a recipient of the Medal of Valor, which is the highest honor a civilian can get in the United States of America. He is the founder of seavalor.org, and the mission of Sea Valor is to use sailing and other ocean activities to help improve the quality of life for those with physical or emotional wounds, such as PTSD, underprivileged youth, and local heroes. So I had the opportunity to go up to Oakland, California, and I met Eric at the marina, and we went sailing. It was a blast. I went with Eric and a couple of his crew people, Jesse and Boots, and a few dogs, and it was great. It was so much fun. Lucky and Franklin, I always have to name the dogs. Lucky and Franklin and Maddie were on deck for cuddles, and it was a beautiful day, and I even got to drive the boat a little bit. Is that what they call it? I don't know, but that's what I did. Is it called driving the boat when you're on a sailboat and you're at the wheel? I'm going to say yes, because I have no idea if that's what it is. We're going to pretend it's like a car. Anyway, it's so great. They offer ocean-themed programs and activities which help veterans, firefighters, healthcare workers, law enforcement, underprivileged youth, families of those affected by suicide, and anyone else struggling with physical or emotional wounds. I got that right off of the seavalor.org website. They are a donations-based program, and you can donate at seavalor.org. It's real great. Highly recommend it. This conversation was fantastic. Really good guy. He's done a lot to help his fellow human, which we love here at Hey Human. Other news, if you are eligible to vote in the United States, please go register and or make sure you do cast your vote. It's a very important election. And remember, it's not just a presidential vote. It's also House vote, Senate vote. Those seats, there's seats open. There is sheriffs and county clerks and a lot of stuff that affects you at a local level. Also, I want to bring up, as I did last week, get counted by the census. You can go to 2020census.gov and get counted. Now, I've seen stuff on the internets that try to convince people that doing the census is a bad idea. Oh, that's how the man will know you, and that's how you'll get tracked and things like that. Well, here's the thing. The census is important because in order to have proper representation for the people of this country, they need to know how many people there are and where they are. So the census, they need to know for federal funding. They need to know for representation. All of that matters. Your voice matters. So make sure it's counted. That's my little speech. Okay. But seriously, I think it's very important. I think voting and census counting, all that stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of talk to make us feel like we're not worth hearing from. That could not be further from the truth. And in fact, it's so far from the truth that there wouldn't be so many people trying to convince you otherwise if it didn't matter. You know what I mean? The fact that there's so much disinformation and such a campaign for people to not vote and to not be heard and to feel like, oh, it doesn't matter anyway. That's intentional because they don't want you to do it because they don't want anything to change. So that's my feelings on the matter. All right, enough of my big speech about government and stuff, or my little speech. In other news, social media, Hey Human Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook, and Susan Ruthism is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I gotta tell you though, I just watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix. Boy, it's hard to keep social media after seeing a show like that, but here we are. Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com if you want to email me. You can check out my music and art and things like that at susanruth.com, and also sign up for the mailing list, which I do not hammer you with emails. You'll get one about every quarter. Heyhumanpodcast.com has tons of links on the links page there, and every episode has its own pile of links that I carefully pick to make sure you know all about our guest and what they're about and things we've talked about and references and things like that, books and movies and articles. So definitely check that out. Internationally, there are, I put on the links page places where you can sign up to volunteer or donate. So that's really important on a global scale. And I should mention also, I appreciate the fact that this is now a global podcast. Thank you for listening and for spreading the word. I really appreciate it. And I know that sometimes when I talk, it seems I'm a little United States centric and things like, oh, go vote or do the census or whatever. But I do believe that in every country that having our voice heard is important. And I think it affects every country. So what we do here in the United States absolutely ripples out into the rest of the world. So as we have seen in the past few years, it's important to have your voice be heard. I know I'm like a broken record, but I really believe that. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That's super duper helpful. And my friend Sammy and I wrote a song about voting, and it's fun. We made a video. You can find that if you go to muskrats.com, muscratz.com. So definitely go and check that out. It's not safe for work, as they say, so just be aware of that. Maybe don't listen to it when you've got the little ones in the car or something. So that's it for me and my ramblings. Definitely check out seavalor.org and what they're doing. Donate to them if you can. It's a really worthy cause. And stay safe, everyone. Have each other's backs. Give each other a hand. Be kind and loving. Because we are all fighting a battle. And we all know it. We forget. We forget that other people are going through stuff. And just be there for each other. God, we've got to survive. We've got to survive this humanity thing. It's a trip and it's hard, but it's worth it to be there for each other. Be there for each other. I'm going to say it one more time. Be there for each other. All right, here we go. Eric Jones, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are in lovely Oakland, not to be confused with San Francisco. No, we're in Emeryville. Is that still Oakland?
Emeryville. It's next to Oakland.
Next to Oakland.
Yeah.
I've got to get my California geography better figured out. I was introduced to you from Tony Green, who's been on the show, and he's fantastic. And he was your teacher when you were a kid?
He was a long time ago. He was my freshman year in high school history teacher.
That's so cool. What an inspirational teacher to have. I'm sure that he blew people's minds open.
He did. He was amazing. He was one of my favorite teachers and really got me thinking about the world in a larger perspective and planted a seed of wanting to travel and see what's out there. So I love Tony. He's great. Best teacher to have. I loved interviewing him. I think he's fantastic. All right, let's get to you. You grew up in California? I did. I grew up here in Oakland.
Okay.
Went to public schools up until high school and then transferred to a private Catholic high school.
Why did you transfer? Were you in trouble?
No, I wasn't in trouble. It was just they had a really good basketball team, and I played basketball and really wanted to be on a good team. And academically, I think it was a little more challenging. So
well, I'm sure private schools usually are. All right, what did you play? What position?
I was a forward.
I was gonna guess forward, but I wasn't sure. Okay. Nice. You favor a guy that I went to high school with, Christian. He was a point guard, but y'all look very similar. Really good guy. He passed away, unfortunately. Not to bring everybody down, but really good guy. All right, so growing up, I'm going to sort of regurgitate your history at you, and then you can expound, because that's the easiest way to do it, I think.
Sure.
Your father is military. Your grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman.
He was, yes.
So freaking cool. Can you talk about that at all? Just about the history of your family and military?
So, we have a pretty long line of military going back all the way, I think, to the Civil War on my father's side. And my grandfather was actually one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. So it was really neat growing up with them. And as a kid, I would go to their conventions every summer with my grandparents. They were in different cities all over the country. So it was just a really good group of people to grow up with and have as role models. And I really looked up to them. So Yeah, and just their history and what they'd been through, and hearing the stories firsthand was pretty incredible for a little kid to grow up like that.
Does anything spring to mind that your grandfather told you about?
Just the challenges that they faced, the adversity that they had to overcome. I remember one of my grandfather's best friends, a man named Leo Gray, they flew together, and Leo was telling me a story. I think they were in a fight somewhere, a dog fight somewhere, and his wingman went into a steep dive and wasn't able to pull up, and they saw him crash, but they had to keep going and didn't have time to warn him. They just had to keep doing. So I think from a very early age I learned courage and sort of honor through my grandparents.
Wow. And we talked yesterday that there's an archive of your grandfather's history by the National Archives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that one day. I've never found it, but
I'm gonna have to dig around for that.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, if I find it, I'll definitely post it on the links page on the website on Hey Human.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll send it to you, maybe, if you're lucky.
Right.
So as a kid, knowing that your grandfather did all this great thing for his country and served in the military, and yet faced, when he was back in America, likely faced a lot of issues. What was that like as a kid, but sort of putting that in perspective, because you grew up in a totally different generation.
I did.
And that's a lot to wrap your head around, that this man that you honor and admire so much had that struggle. How do you wrap your head around that as a kid?
Just really, it was both my grandfather and my grandmother. I mean, they certainly experienced segregation and discrimination growing up, but they were both very religious and faithful people, and they taught me forgiveness. And that was a very strong message to learn, because they didn't hold any resentment. I mean, they were mistreated, who knows how many times, hundreds if not thousands of times throughout their lives, but they weren't bitter, they weren't angry. They loved this country tremendously. My grandmother she worked as a public servant her entire career for the government. So yeah, it's just I never heard them speak poorly about the military or the country or even individuals. They just sort of put that in their past and moved on. And so yeah, I think the forgiveness was really, really an important message.
I imagine that shaped your father as well. He was Air Force?
He was. He started out, he went to officer candidate school and graduated at the top of his class, which is, he's a very, very smart person. And just worked his way up all the way to be a full colonel in the Air Force. And he flew in Vietnam, I think 80-something combat missions, so he's seen a lot as well. And same with him. He's certainly dealt with adversity throughout his life and in the military, and he never let it make him bitter or resentful in any way either.
I can't even imagine coming back from Vietnam and everything that one would see there.
And he was at the time when he came back here to the Bay Area, I think he's told me stories of actually being spit on. He'd be in a uniform and people would spit on him because...
The anti-Vietnam.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually asked him recently, last week, how he was able to manage those things and sort of not react violently or not get into fights. He never, as far as I know, he's never been in a fist fight, which is odd to me. If somebody came up and spit in my face after I had just gotten back from combat, I'm not sure that I would have the calmness to not react somehow, but he never did. So again, he taught me just to think and work things out diplomatically, I guess, instead of through force.
It's very zen.
Yeah.
To be a parent too after experiencing that has got to be a very bizarre thing.
I would imagine. Certainly it is.
Yeah. Was your family super close? You're an only child?
Yes.
Were you all super close and tight-knit growing up?
Yes and no. My parents were divorced when I was 3, so I guess as close as two divorced parents can be. And my grandparents lived in Washington, D.C., so I'd only see them on summers or, sometimes every now and then they would come out here for a visit. But I wouldn't say that we were super close, but I know everybody loved each other.
Yeah.
But we were spread out geographically, so that made it more challenging.
Did your grandmother in her service as a public servant, did she do that at the Pentagon then in DC, or?
No, mostly, I think she actually worked at the archives.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, she had government jobs, but I think she actually worked at the archives. I'd have to check with my dad, but...
I think that'd be such a cool job. Can you imagine that your whole life is just collecting stories and making sure that because such a great generation is no longer, really, I mean, is there anyone, there's just a handful left.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that yesterday. I think my grandfather would be 110 this year.
Yeah.
And so there's not many of his peers still left.
No.
I don't know how many of the original Tuskegee Airmen are still alive, but it's got to be a very, very small number.
Yeah, very small. It's such a shame too, because I do think that we tend to forget our history. Yeah. And the voices that carry those stories, the oral traditions onward, if they're no longer, and if nobody takes the time to go look at the archives or read the stories now online mostly, what's going to become of all those people? Because those are names that need to be repeated.
And that's why, especially, as you know, I was a speaker for several of Tony's classes last week, and just... I got to sit in on one, it was great. Yeah, but just his ability to make history relevant. I mean, I don't know if you were as impressed as the kids as I was, but they blew me away.
I actually sent him a note afterward that, yes, his students are exceptional and very bright, and it brought me hope, because I do get nervous sometimes.
Those were my thoughts exactly. I mean, if this is what the future generation looks like, I'm very encouraged, because they were engaged, they were curious, they were articulate.
Really a sensational group of kids and young adults, really. And Tony, to him, it's a credit, to inspire people to greatness.
That's probably the best word. I mean, he really did inspire me, and I know he inspired all the other classmates that I knew. We loved going to his classes, and I'm just so glad that he and I have been able to stay in touch through these years, and thanks to Facebook, actually. But
the double-edged sword of Facebook. For sure.
I'm really happy it's kept he and I in touch, and he's doing great things with helping kids in the Bay Area, and
he's a good guy. Yay, Tony! When you graduated from high school, did you have a plan to go into a service-oriented profession, or did that come about?
It sort of came about after. I mean, I didn't really have a strong direction in high school. I was sort of all over the place. I ended up going back to Washington, D.C. and living with my grandfather after high school, and my grandmother had died, and he needed help, and I wasn't really, I guess, achieving all I could here in the Bay Area. I think I had sort of stagnated, and so I went back there and lived with him for a year or two, and went to junior college, and that's when I sort of discovered the fire department and emergency medicine and EMS, rather. So.
And you were in a program in college for that stuff?
I was. I went to George Washington University, and they had this really neat program then. The degree was a Bachelor of Science in out-of-hospital emergency medicine. So it was essentially, the first year you become a paramedic. So the entire first year I did paramedic school. And then the following 3 years were the chemistry, general ed classes, biology, those sort of things.
All the hard stuff.
But it was really neat because we took higher level classes. So we were taking, for instance, gross anatomy with third year medical students.
Was it gross?
It was fascinating.
That's cadaver stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pharmacology with PA students. So I was this 19-year-old kid and learning how to put in chest tubes and suture and do really sort of advanced things. And it was an incredible program.
Were you natural for that stuff?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. It didn't, I was very curious and just, I loved medicine, and my plan was to go to med school and become an ER doctor. So for me, it was great. It was a really, really good foundation to have. And, I spent, 2 years doing rotations and all sorts of different specialties in all the hospitals around DC and Northern Virginia. So it was a really great way to sort of see what was a good fit, and I gravitated towards emergency medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
You're very calm. I feel like you spring to things, but stay a true course, which I assume in emergency anything, that's one of the most important things.
Yeah.
You have a kindness, and that helps too, because people are scared. And
and I think anybody, I mean, that just comes over time. I remember certainly the first time I did CPR, I wasn't calm.
No,
I mean, it's the adrenaline, and you don't want to make a mistake, and you're literally trying to save somebody's life. So, but over time, anybody in healthcare, or the fire service, or anything else, you just learn how to sort of stay calm, because being upset doesn't really do any good. And
you were a volunteer firefighter, or were you I don't know the difference.
Yeah, so I was in Prince George's County. Prince George's County is about, I don't know what it is now, but I think at the time it was maybe 50% volunteer and 50% paid. Mm-hmm. And really the only difference was if you were a volunteer, you could sort of work whenever you want and you didn't get paid. But the duties were exactly the same. I mean, we had the station I was at in Hyattsville, we had a rescue truck, so we'd do car accidents, hazmat response. We had all the same training, went to the same fire academy as the professionals. We just didn't get paid. So,
I imagine emergencies like that happen far more often than fire.
Well, when I was there in Hyattsville, I think Hyattsville, my station, we were one of the busiest fire departments in the entire country. I mean, obviously the ones in Manhattan, I think were number one, but just hundreds and hundreds of fire calls every year. So it was a really good experience. We stayed busy all the time. I mean, pretty much every shift we'd go out on at least one fire truck call and 2 or 3 ambulance calls.
Why did you decide to do that? To do something so, important, I get that part, but for no money and just volunteer to go be of service like that?
I really enjoyed it, and it was such a good way to be part of the community and to give back and just meet incredible people. I really enjoyed the work.
Yeah.
And being able to help, and it was exciting. I mean, I was 18 at the time. So yeah, there was definitely that thrill and the excitement, but also
get all the girls.
Yeah, not so much, but no, it was just a lot of fun. And the people, the other firefighters and EMTs that I met and worked with, I mean, they're just really top-notch people. So,
do you remember the first fire you had to go into?
I think the first one, it was in the middle of the night, and it was a commercial fire. So it was like a downtown, and it was various stores were on fire. I think there 2 or 3 stores were on fire, and actually my job at the time was to take the axe and go break all the big plate glass windows so that people could get in and out. So that was my first experience, was going around with this axe, just breaking all the big windows. But yeah, there were a lot after that.
I try to imagine, because your brain is wired to keep you safe, mm-hmm. and to go into a situation where you are going to be unsafe in all likelihood is incredible to me.
Yeah.
How to rewire your brain to be able to do things like that, which of course would serve you later, as we'll get to that as well.
Right. Yeah, and that's the nature of the fire department. Is from day one in the fire academy, you're sort of taught how to go into buildings and be safe about it and trust your partners. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of the nature of the job.
I'm curious, when you were younger, did you have that quality where you would see something, a trouble, and leap to it? Because last night we were at dinner, right. Motorcycle accident, and you leapt right up and went to help. And I mean, I think that's a personality trait.
Right.
I'm sure you can learn it as well, but it seems like a no-brainer for you. You just sort of spring into action.
Well, my mom was a social worker in San Francisco, so I think I certainly got some of that from her, and my grandparents, my dad. It's just, I don't know.
Just rubbed off.
Yeah, somebody needs help, you help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to September 11th and talk about that a bit, because that's a big deal. to me at least.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've compartmentalized that as well, but it's like, oh, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. But you were going to school that day?
I was, yeah. I was taking graduate classes at GW, George Washington, towards a master's in public health. And yeah, just the route that I would drive where I was living, I would have to drive right by the Pentagon pretty much every day. And so that's it. I was headed to class that morning when the plane hit, and that's how I ended up there.
Did you see it come in and hit?
No. I was on the other side. So what I saw was just the initial, just huge black smoke cloud coming up from the explosion. I had no idea it was a plane. I think my first thought was some sort of fuel truck, because it was just this dark black smoke. So I thought maybe there were a car accident or something, a large fire, but I had no idea it was a plane until. And
you hadn't heard about anything else going on?
No.
Yeah.
I had no idea about anything in New York or.
So you pulled over and headed in?
Yeah. So I drove my Jeep around and parked as close as I could. I mean, probably, 100 yards or so from when the plane hit, because at the time they didn't have all the security walls and everything that they do now. So, I mean, you could really get pretty close. And so I just drove as close as I could and got out and started helping carry people outside, out of the building, and then later further as far away from the building as we could get them.
I can't even imagine what that scene must have been like. Total chaos.
Chaos, yeah. It was. People were calm though, so I don't know if chaos is really the word I would think of. I mean, everybody. I don't remember people running, which is kind of strange. People seemed to be a lot calmer than I think I would have imagined. I mean, there was this huge hole in the building and flames shooting out and smoke and everything, but there was certainly nobody was screaming. Nobody really seemed panic. It seemed more just, and maybe that's because it was a military building, and I don't know if people's training, right. But I mean, I remember that being one of the things I was very impressed about, is just how calm people were. Did it
occur to people right away that you were there helping, and did they send you in a certain direction, or did you just have to do what you were doing?
No, I mean, there was no organization at all. It was literally mostly the people that I helped carry other people out were Pentagon employees.
Deceased, I assume?
No, I'm sorry. So most of the other rescue workers initially were Pentagon employees that were helping carry their coworkers out.
Got it.
Maybe one or two other passerbys or something, but pretty much everybody I remember had some sort of uniform on from one of the various branches. And yeah, I mean, it's literally, we would just go in and drag people out, go back in, drag people out. We did that for, 15 minutes or so.
Did they gear you up?
No. I mean, this was, I think the fire department hadn't even shown up at that point. So
you were really the first on the scene.
Yeah. I mean, I was there probably, within 5 minutes or so, maybe 10, I don't know. Probably.
How long you were there for 3 days straight? No sleep, just rocking on?
I think 4. I finally left that Friday afternoon, so.
On pure adrenaline and.
Yeah, they had a tent with some cots in it, so maybe get an hour or two of rest. I don't know if it was really sleep. I don't remember actually falling asleep, but at least we'd lay down sometime at 2 or 3 in the morning or something for a few hours.
And were there people there to take care of y'all that fed and watered you while you were doing all this?
I'm sure
Red Cross?
Yeah, I think the Arlington County had a canteen truck, but I don't really remember that specific. But I mean, definitely we had food and water. I just don't remember where it came from. I think there was a canteen truck or volunteers or something, but I don't really remember eating much either.
So going from someone who experienced the medical training just as a first responder to being in the thick of something so violent and tremendous, how do you compartmentalize something like that in the moment?
I think it's pretty easy in the moment, because it was all very simple. Initially, it was people were hurt; they needed to be carried out of the building. So there wasn't much confusion as far as what needed to be done. It was just get this person from inside the building to outside where they could receive treatment. So that was all really anybody cared about for the first half an hour or so.
Had the news trickled in by the second? I mean, I imagine by the end of the first day, you had an idea of what was going on?
Yeah. I mean, maybe within 2 hours or maybe even less than that, but probably within the first hour, people started talking about New York. And then I remember specifically hearing that the first tower had collapsed. So that was, I think, in real time. And I'm not sure exactly how many minutes it had been, but it was all word of mouth and sort of second or third hand, because we didn't have smartphones, so you weren't watching CNN or anything on the phone. It was people that would hear something from somebody and then it would work its way down to us. But yeah, by the first hour or so, we knew that it was a terrorist attack. Yeah.
I remember being asleep in my room, and my roommate, Ellen, who my best friend, she and I were roommates at the time, she came up into my room. She said, something's going on. A plane hit one of the towers in New York. And I said, what? Wait, it was an accident? She said, nobody knows.
Right.
And so then I got out of bed and I came downstairs and we watched together as the second one. And I was like, Jesus, this is an attack. Like, something major is happening. And my parents were out of town.
Right.
And I tried desperately to find them because they thought they were so sly. We're going on a little trip. We're not telling anybody where we are. We just knew they were in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That was crazy. But, yeah, boy, howdy. So where in your mind did you make that shift? Okay, once I'm done here, I'm going to go to ground zero. Or did that just happen as a linear, obvious thing to do?
Yeah, so that, like I said, that Friday I left and I went home. There was a message or two on my answer machine. People from my fire department were going up to New York because most of the New York firefighters, same thing, they'd been working around the clock. So they were exhausted as well. I mean, they were pretty much working from the morning of September 11th and never left the scene. So they were going on 4 days with, same thing, very, very little sleep.
And many of their friends had perished.
Yeah. And so fire departments from all over the country were sending teams. And my department, same thing. There were teams going up there. And so that's how I ended up going up to New York. And I went home, and I just remember being like, I didn't want to be home at all. I didn't want to be by myself. And I was trying to process everything I had just experienced at the Pentagon for those 4 days. And so as soon as I heard that message, I was out the door within probably 5 minutes. I don't even think I changed. I just grabbed my turnout gear and, maybe a change of underwear and that sort of thing, toothbrush, and threw it in the car, and then ended up going up to ground zero. Yeah.
And how did you first experience it when you arrived? How did, as it's hitting you, the gravity of the entire situation?
Yeah.
Are you still maintaining that calm and level-headedness, or is it starting to? So
I guess the biggest regret I have from the Pentagon was not finding anybody else alive. For the first day, that was the hope, that there were people trapped, that we'd find more survivors. And that's everybody there. That's what sort of kept us going, is the hope of finding other people. And as the first day wore on, and then the second day, it became clear that there was nobody else alive, and that was a hard pill to swallow. And so I think for me, the chance of being part of actually finding people alive in New York, I really needed that. And I was, I guess, I don't think excited is the right word, but I was optimistic that I could be part of helping recover people alive, that were perhaps trapped in a stairwell or buried or who knows. And so I really wanted to be a part of something positive, because the experience of the Pentagon had just been so disheartening and sad. So I think I certainly was calm, but I just really wanted to get there as soon as I could and join up with the rest of the people from my fire department. And
how long were you in Ground Zero working?
I don't know exactly, but I think it was right around maybe 10 days or so, something like that. Maybe 11 days.
How did you protect yourself from it? Because I know a lot of people have gotten sick.
Yeah.
Do you see any of that happening to you? Have you experienced any of that?
I have, yeah. I mean, I had a lot of lung issues for the first year or so. Every time I'd lay on my back, I'd cough and had trouble sleeping because I'd cough so much, and I had difficulty walking upstairs and skiing, that sort of thing. I'd run out of breath very quickly. It's gotten better over the years, but yeah, I mean, I think everybody that was there, because we didn't really, it was just too hot. You couldn't wear your breathing apparatus. I mean, so typically firefighters, you'd wear, it's like a scuba tank. It's an air tank on the back, and breathe that for an hour or so and then put in a new bottle. But that just wasn't realistic up at Ground Zero, because you were there for 24 hours a day. So you'd be, I don't know, going through 20 bottles or something a day, and the resources just weren't there for that. So we didn't have masks. I guess every now and then we'd use those respirators that you use for painting, but they were just too hot. So I think most of the time we just didn't wear anything, or, we'd have like a cloth mask or a bandana or something. And I had my it's like a fireproof balaclava, however you pronounce it, that like you see the race car drivers wear. It's what firefighters wear. It covers your head and your ears and most of your face. So I wore that, and I'd pull that up over my nose and mouth a bunch, but I don't know how effective it was. Because the whole thing, I mean, Ground Zero, as you know, it was on fire for weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still on fire when I left. So I don't know when they finally extinguished it.
It boggles my mind that there wasn't enough supplies to keep everyone safe who was trying to get in there and rescue. I just think, that's one fighter jet they could have not purchased, so that...
Yeah.
That stuff frustrates me to no end.
It is. I mean, they tried, like the volunteers that were at Ground Zero. I don't know where they came from, probably all over the country, but I mean, they were incredible. Anything we needed, food, water, and they did. I mean, they did the best they could with what they had.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of rescue workers at Ground Zero, and so trying to get masks or respirators or something to that many people, I just with such little warning and planning, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think they did the best they could.
I'm hoping there's things in place now.
Yeah, I would hope so.
God willing.
Hopefully
that
nothing like this
again.
Exactly.
But if it were to, I would hope that they have supplies needed to protect the people that are trying to rescue folks. How'd you feel about leaving? That must have been really difficult.
I was so exhausted by then that I was ready to go, and I unfortunately was not part of finding anybody alive at Ground Zero either. And so by the time I left, I was just emotionally and physically spent, as was everybody else. I mean, it was 2 weeks after the fact, and people had just been working around the clock pretty much at Ground Zero as well.
How did you come to terms to process? I'm sure it's a lifelong experience, things you've seen, but...
Yeah, it's, well, like you said, I mean, I'm still processing it in many ways, and I don't know if there's a particular way that works for everybody, but I've certainly found things over the years that have helped me sort of come to peace and come to terms with what happened.
How do you feel when you hear about people talking conspiracy about, the Pentagon never got hit and those were all crisis actors and all that? One of my neighbors when I lived in Colorado, nice guy, he and I were skiing together, and on the drive home, somehow it came up, and, same thing. He was telling me that it was a missile that hit the Pentagon, and, so I tried to explain to him, and I said, Kyle, look, I was there. I picked up parts of the plane. I mean, you could see clearly, it says American Airlines on the tail. I mean, it was 100% a plane. And he just, I don't know, I don't think he ever really believed me. There's some conspiracy guy on the internet that has a whole blog about me and a few other people saying how we were CIA agents and helped plant bodies there, and we're part of the cover-up. So I mean, people are going to have their conspiracy theories. How exciting!
Yeah, it's very well written. I actually reached out to the guy asking if he wanted to get lunch, but I never heard back from him, because I would just love to hear what these people like. When they talk to somebody like me who's saying, "Look, I was there. I literally picked up."
But they don't want to hear that.
Pieces of the plane. No, I mean,
they don't want the truth. They want to be able to perpetrate the whatever's going on in their brain pan.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just for attention or some people just like we were talking about last night with the flat Earth, and so I don't know. I think a lot of these people don't really truly believe it. They just sort of enjoy being part of that.
The attention it brings?
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean...
It's so dangerous perpetuating things like that, though. And it's also, to me at least, I mean, I don't know how other people feel about it. It's so disrespectful to the families that who lost loved ones, to the people who worked tirelessly to get...
I'd be furious. I mean, it's the same with like these... the Sandy Hook people. I mean, I'd be furious if I was a family member who'd lost somebody, but people are entitled to their opinions, and if people are dumb enough to believe these people, I mean, all I can do is say, look, I was there. Either you trust me, and when I tell you that yes, it was a plane, and same with New York. I mean, I saw they had I think I have a picture somewhere where they had this huge dumpster, and it said plane parts, and any plane part went in this big dumpster. It was
filled with Legos.
No, I mean, you could see the engines. Like somehow they got the engines in these things. So,
of course.
Yeah, I mean, people can think whatever they want. But yeah, it was a plane in the Pentagon for sure, and definitely Ground Zero, because I've seen the parts, and I'm a pilot. I know what planes look like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Let people think what they want, I guess.
Yeah, it's still frustrating. When you found out that you were going to be given the Medal of Valor for everything that you had done, what was that moment like?
I was really honored, of course, and humbled, because I knew that I was just one of dozens of people. So I wasn't exactly sure why I had been singled out, but I was certainly honored. I think I was nominated by a lieutenant colonel that had seen me actually carrying people out, and she sort of wrote about that, what she witnessed, and so it was just an incredible honor. And my grandfather was there, some of the Tuskegee Airmen were there, my father was there, my mother
I watched it.
Did you?
I did.
And
let me tell you something, your speech was phenomenal. It was really lovely, and I did not count a single which is nearly impossible for me, I know. So well done. Under that pressure.
I was caught off guard. I didn't know we'd have to speak, and as you can tell now, I mean, I hate speaking in public speaking.
Doing great.
But yeah, so I was a little bit caught off guard, but.
And the man that also was awarded.
Steve, yeah.
What a lovely man.
He was incredible, and I'd actually seen him, not within the first hour or so, but I actually worked with him somehow. I think he was part of the mortuary affairs team also, because same thing, he'd stuck around. And
is that what you were assigned to, mortuary affairs?
Yeah, that's what I volunteered for, the mortuary affairs team. And so I got to know Steve during those 4 days, and he helped, like 20 people or something maybe, get out of the building. So he was definitely worthy of that as well. Just an incredible person.
Where do you go from that? How did you spend the next, not from the Medal of Valor, which incredible honor, obviously, and you were given a flag as well, correct? Two flags actually, but I was given one from the Pentagon. It was a huge flag, and I didn't really have any place to I mean, I don't know how many feet this thing was, like 20 feet long or something. So I had it folded as best I could, and I kept it in my closet for the first year. And then I actually got to know Ross Perot, and he has this. He flew me to Texas a couple times to help pay for medical treatments, or I saw a pulmonologist there and a neurologist for some other issues I was having. So I got to know him, and he loves the military and he loves this country, and he has this museum where people that he's helped over the years, especially veterans and their families, to say thank you, they give him various things. And I remember he had Osama bin Laden's cane from Tora Bora. He had Osama bin Laden's AK-47 that you'd see in all the photographs, So just really interesting stuff. There was a picture of him where the entire crew of one of the aircraft carriers spelled out, "Thank you, Mr. Perot," by standing on the carrier deck. So he has all this stuff in the museum, and I asked if he would like that flag to, display it, and so he said yes, and that's where it's been all these years. It's in Plano, Texas, in his little museum. I was really sad when he died, because he never wanted any sort of recognition
And that's one of the things he told me. He said, I'll pay for whatever medical stuff you need, but just
keep it on the down low.
Yeah, keep it quiet. He didn't want recognition or anything else. So,
did all those things that you were seeking treatment for, did it all work out okay?
I guess. I mean, my lungs are better now, so I guess.
Still skiing?
Yeah, I'm still skiing.
And snowboarders aren't trying to take you out.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he was an incredible person.
You met a lot of people through all your work, huh?
Yeah. It's an interesting experience. And
because you were in the Olympics, the torch.
No, I wasn't in the Olympics. I think President Bush selected me, and then a woman, Elizabeth Howell, whose husband Brady was killed at the Pentagon. So he selected the two of us to be torchbearers at the White House for the Olympic ceremony.
Okay.
Yeah. So she ran the torch in, and she gave it to him, and then he gave 2 or 3 minute speech or something, and then he gave it to me, and I ran it outside the White House, around the front of the White House, and then lit a truck, and the truck drove the flame to Philadelphia.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it was. And President Bush, I mean, I didn't necessarily agree with him for a lot of his political things, but he really was incredible to the rescue workers. The first time I met him was on September 12th, and he actually came to, the Pentagon was still on fire, like smoke and everything else, and he came there, and he was 20 feet away from the burning building, and he spent, I don't know, maybe an hour, and he shook every single rescue worker's hands. He just went down the line, and I don't know, there were probably 40 of us or something on the mortuary affairs team, and he spent probably a minute with each of us just thanking us and encouraging us, and it was true leadership. And so I really respected that about him, and it was so important because our morale at that point was very, very low. It was 24 hours or maybe 30 hours in, we hadn't found anybody else alive, and it was just this nightmarish situation of just seeing death everywhere. And so to have him come and actually show concern, it meant a lot, and it really lifted everybody's spirit. So yeah, he was very, very much appreciated for that.
Did you resume your studies?
No. After that experience, I decided I'd be happy if I never saw another dead body, and I just knew that I couldn't continue with the medicine and going down that road.
Yeah.
I needed time to process. I thought maybe I'd eventually go back into it, but I was having the health issues and mental health issues from all that. So I knew that I needed to work on those things first, and then I just decided it wasn't for me anymore.
Your PTSD from all of that experience, I'm sure, was amplified with every step.
Yeah, and it's one of the things with PTSD. It took years to sort of understand that that's what was happening. I didn't really know much about it, but over the course of the following years, I sort of learned that that's what I was experiencing: depression and anxiety and sleeplessness, all sort of stemmed from those 2 weeks.
Yeah. And PTSD with military and firefighters and police officers, and it's very high.
It is, unfortunately. Yeah, it's well, as you know, that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. But I've known, I think, 7 people that have taken their lives because of PTSD since 9/11. A couple of people that I didn't know them well. I wouldn't say that we were friends, but I knew them. I certainly spent a few hours at least working with some of them, and so yeah, it hits very hard every time you hear something like that, because these are my heroes. All these people, and I'd seen what they'd done and the sacrifices they'd made, and so for them to be so despondent that they decide that taking their own lives is their best course, it's just heartbreaking every time it happens.
Yeah, of course. What did you do for the next couple of years? What was your plan?
After 9/11, just moved fully into civilian life and got married, and did the we were talking about my little urban farm and rescue animals and that sort of thing. But the 9/11 stuff, it was always sort of on the forefront. I'd never really figured out how to separate myself from that. even now, I'm probably, like this past 9/11 anniversary was probably the worst one I've ever had for some reason. It was very emotional.
Do you think it's because the country is so divided?
I think that's part of it. And
it's as if people forget. They come together for this thing and then it dissipates.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I think we talked about with Mr. Green's class, Tony Green's class, is just, for me, what I witnessed during those 2 weeks was incredible, because you had people from all different backgrounds, races, religions, genders, socioeconomic status, ethnicities, even people from foreign countries, and it didn't matter. The only goal was to help fellow Americans that had been hurt or killed, and to witness that and just see how strongly and closely people could come together.
Yeah,
it was incredible. And then over these years, just seeing the divisiveness, especially that we're now, it's sad, and I hope we can figure out a way to get past this. But
I do too. Well, the anti-Muslim issue that cropped up after 9/11 too. I've talked to a lot of people that, the hate that was, it's like being an Asian American right now, and they're getting a lot of hate, and people are being spit on and yelled at and called terrible names, and it breaks my heart that people cannot see the humanity as a whole.
Yeah. It is. It's
and that the actions of a few horrible people somehow dictate how everyone who would want to be lumped in like that. That's like saying, oh, you have blue eyes, so everyone with blue eyes, they're terrible. They've done these things, so I'm just going to hate. Yeah, no, it's awful. And I mean, I took it extremely personally, because some of my best friends are Muslim, and one of my best friends in college, Amir, he's now the top orthopedic surgeon at Vanderbilt, and his brother Iman, I mean, they are the ultimate American success story. They came here as young children, wanting a better life, fleeing the difficulties in Iran, and just worked extremely hard, and got scholarships to college and then into medical school. And now, like I said, Amir is the top orthopedic surgeon at Vanderbilt. Who knows how many lives he's saved, and his brother is a cardiologist out here in California. My friend Abe in Walnut Creek, who owns an insurance company that employs 20-something people, same thing. I mean, he came here, I've known him since first grade. But yeah, to see them discriminated against and called terrorists, and it was just awful. And especially Amir, I went to visit him in Tennessee when he was in medical school, and there were situations where he'd be treating people, literally saving their lives, and they were saying, I don't want you touching me, find somebody else. And so that was heartbreaking to hear those stories. I hope that it's gotten better in the past 20 years, but I don't know if the past couple of years have anything to show. I don't know. So Haiti, the earthquake happened 2010. What inspired you then? Was it just the same thing, like people need me and I'm gonna go? Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, I was at a point in my life where I was sort of in transition, and the earthquake happened, and for the first few days I had no interest in going whatsoever. And then as the days wore on, and I had friends going from the fire department, and a team from Johns Hopkins with they're part of the search and rescue team, and then medical team. And so I eventually decided after, 4 or 5 days, that I was just sitting there literally doing nothing, and I felt that my experience and my training could be used, and I was being selfish by not going. And so I went and joined up with the teams there, and spent a couple weeks in Haiti. Did you have to, I imagine if you're already having the PTSD issues, having to override your brain going, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you going back into this? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but again, with Haiti, it was the idea of being able to help. And you think about, and you'd see the images on TV of just people trapped in rubble. And then here I am sitting, I have skills, and I had the time. There was no reason I couldn't go. And so I just felt I was being selfish by not going. And Haiti, actually, it was incredibly devastating, of course, but we were able to help save people, which is something that, unlike ground zero, in Haiti, there were people that were pulled out weeks after the earthquake, still alive. And so for me to be part of that, to be part of something positive, it
was good.
I have a couple friends who also were there volunteering, and they said the thing that struck them the most was that in the midst of, firstly, the poverty there is astronomical, but in the midst of this devastation, there was joy and people were singing and and there was hope.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. And in fact, I was asked recently what my favorite country is, and I don't know if that was in the class that you watched, but my answer was Haiti, and it was for that reason, because the people, I mean, Port-au-Prince, absolutely destroyed. The smaller cities and towns were just totally destroyed. And I think, what was it, like 250,000 people were killed. So, I mean, everywhere you went, there were just bodies and the smell of death, and pretty much every building was unsafe and unstable. But there wasn't despair. I mean, people, again, they were helping each other. I mean, of course, there were incidences of looting and that sort, but overall, they came together, and the international community came together, and volunteer organizations from all over the world. And so it was uplifting to see humanity in a time of incredible need bond together and figure out what needs to be done to help people. And so, yeah, I mean, that was uplifting. And the Haitians, their spirit and their strength, and like you said, the people, it was just so encouraging.
Do you believe in a higher power?
I mean, I do, yeah. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but I believe there's something greater than us. And I mean, you look at nature and how a tree works, or a flower,
or a dog,
honeybees or dogs or something, and until a scientist can prove to, like, take two inanimate rocks and somehow use a mathematical equation to create life, if they can ever replicate that in a lab. But until then, I like to think that there's some sort of intelligent being or spirit or something that has helped create all of this. I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Does that help?
I mean, I think so, yeah. I think it's sad to think that we're just created from dust that somehow found life, and I don't know. So yeah, I like to think that there's something larger, and that when we die, our spirits or souls or whatever come back somehow, or it's comforting.
Yeah. Have you had moments where you didn't want to be on the planet anymore after seeing everything you've seen?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. What brings you back? What grounds you again?
Just the desire to keep trying, not give up. And I think life is precious, and if 9/11 taught me anything, it's just how precious life is and how quickly it can be extinguished and taken from us. So I would never have looked that gift horse in the mouth, I guess.
Yeah. What brought you to Sea Valor?
So it's something I started a couple years ago, specifically to help people with PTSD, because I know what a struggle I've had with it. Just the access, the barriers to access in medical care, and specifically mental health care, were huge. And I have a minor in psychology and great college education and friends and family and resources and health insurance. And even for me, it was so hard. It's so hard to find a therapist that accepts your insurance and can see you and knows about PTSD, and then you trust. And so, I've really struggled with it for the past 20 years. And I just thought, well, if I'm having such a hard time, think about all the people that don't have the same resources or sort of knowledge that I have. And so it frustrated me, and it frustrated me that I keep seeing American heroes kill themselves. And whether that's overt acts like, hanging or using a gun or something, or if they're more subtle like alcoholism or overdosing on drugs or something.
Or die of disease, homeless.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a huge problem with veterans.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, especially here in the Bay Area. And so it's so frustrating, and that's not even a strong enough word, to see our country with our incredible resources. And I feel like in many ways we've just turned our back on people, and especially veterans. I mean, send people overseas, men and women, to do what our country asks them to. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be killing people and being shot at, but they do it because it's their duty. And then they come back and they have issues with what they've seen or what they've done, and they just can't seem to get the resources that I feel they're entitled to, and it's just so frustrating. And so I thought perhaps there was a way that I could use sort of my experience and people that I've met over the years, and maybe the Medal of Valor, to sort of raise awareness about what a huge problem this is in the country, and see if, there's something that can be done. Maybe start a national conversation that, hey, look, these are the problems. You have, 22 veterans, or the average number that's thrown out. Let's just say 22 veterans a day killing themselves, and who knows how many firefighters or police officers or healthcare workers, or just really anybody that's experienced trauma in their life and just needs help working through it.
The COVID workers, the healthcare workers, they've been committing suicide, the ones that are on the front lines of dealing with this pandemic. Which again, it's so frustrating that people are like, oh, it's fake.
Yeah, it's infuriating.
It's so disrespectful.
It is. It's infuriating. And like I said earlier, if people want to think there's a conspiracy with, missiles or something hitting the Pentagon, sure, let them think that. Or if they want to think the Earth is flat, or there wasn't a moon landing, let them think whatever they want. But when it comes to something like wearing a mask, where you can, fine, if you don't want to protect yourself, that's fine. But don't be in a situation where you can give it to somebody else, like my father, who's 81 years old and has cancer. It's just so disrespectful.
And your father isn't a throwaway human. It's the idea that people over a certain age are somehow not worthy of continued existence is absurd.
Yeah, and so, I don't like wearing a mask. I'm sure you don't like wearing a mask. Nobody does.
No.
But you do it because it's
skin, let me tell you.
Well, it's just nobody likes wearing a mask, but you do it because it's
the respectful
thing right thing to do. So,
and even if, I would venture to say that even if the research, obviously we don't have all the data, but even if it's maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, why not err on the side of caution? It's like believing in a higher power.
Yeah.
It's that, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but let's just hedge our bets and go for it.
And it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah, like you said,
it's an inconvenience.
If it saves 10 lives in the country, isn't that worth it? If it saves 100 or 1,000,
it seems like it would be, yes.
Yeah, so that's frustrating.
Yeah. Why a sailboat or two? And explain that too, that process. You sold your house?
I did, yeah, and ended up getting the boats. But so, like I said, in the past, it's been almost 20 years since 9/11, and I've tried conventional therapy and antidepressants and support groups, meditation. I've tried a lot of the traditional things, and some have helped, some haven't. But one of the things I found with depression and PTSD is you sort of lose sight of things that make you happy. And for me in particular, prior to 9/11, I was a totally different person. I was a pilot. I loved flying. I loved skiing and traveling and, going to the beach with my dogs, scuba diving, whatever. And then after 9/11, everything was just sort of dull. And it's still not back to how it was. I don't think it ever will be. But, you just sort of forget what it's like to feel happiness, because you're just constantly weighed down by the traumatic whatever events that, whether it's nightmares or lack of sleep, and it's just like this gray cloud that's constantly over you. And so for me, I really had to focus on, okay, what things in life make me happy, and animals, rescuing animals. I had that little mini farm in Northern Virginia. That really made me happy, but it's not really practical to have donkeys and horses and llamas and everything out here. So that wasn't sort of a long-term solution. So for me, I found that the ocean and being part of this just incredibly vast and powerful force, that brought me happiness. And being out on the water, whether it was on a paddleboard or a surfboard. I'm not a great surfer, but it's just, there's this tranquility. And then sailing in particular, I picked that up about 10 years ago, just when I was in Virginia on the Potomac River in tiny little boats. And then a friend invited me to bring his sailboat up from Florida to Annapolis. So for 4 days, we were out there in 20-foot swells out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Learning as you went?
I was crew. So there were 3 of us on the boat, and the other 2 people really were experienced, but they taught me, okay, do this, do that. And so 4 days just being out in the water, it was so therapeutic, and it was probably the happiest I'd felt in at least since before 9/11. So that sort of planted the seed. That was maybe 10 years ago, and actually I was under contract for a sailboat 10 years ago, and it just kind of fell through. Somebody outbid me, which was frustrating. But so when this opportunity came about here after after I moved back to California, I started sailing with friends on the weekend, and I found that I could be sad and sort of depressed during the week, but then come Friday, I'd start looking forward to Saturday and our sailboat trips. And for those 4 or 5 hours we were out sailing, I felt good. I was around like-minded people, I was part of a team, part of nature. And so that's really what got me thinking about it. Well, if this has helped me when so many other traditional therapies have not, maybe it can help other people. And so, I had like I said, I was a bifurcation in my life where I could go one way or the other, and I decided to actually pursue this and see if I could do something that might help other people. So we'll see. So far so good.
And talk about your crew a little bit, the people that come out and help and facilitate, because people reach out to you that have PTSD and to be a part of the program, but there's people on your crew that are trained to help them. Right.
Yeah. So the idea with Sea Valor is I started with one boat, and now I have 2 boats, and really that's it. I mean, really anybody with PTSD or depression or those are sort of the target groups that I'm focusing on now. But yeah, they come sailing and they learn to sail, and we spend 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday or Sunday, and there's no agenda. People just come out, and if they want to talk to other people, they do. If they don't, they don't. If they want to learn specifics, then we'll sort of teach them the basics. If they want to just enjoy the ride, and then they always have an open invitation if they want to actually be part of the crew and volunteer in whatever capacity, or just keep coming out. And so, I mean, that's how I've ended up with the crew that I have now. They all started sailing and enjoyed it. Now, like you've met Jesse and Eric yesterday, and
great guys.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We didn't do normally the long trip that we do, but at least you got an idea of what it's like.
It was great. I got to steer. That was exciting.
Yeah, and see the dolphins.
Yeah. And cuddle dogs. That was the best.
Yeah, and so what I'm hoping is that eventually it can grow to something where you have rich people with boats that use them once or twice a year, paired up with veterans, firefighters, law enforcement, nurses, teachers, etc., all over the country. So it's a win-win. So that the people with the boats that rarely use them can take out, other people that wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity. Inner city kids or economically challenged kids, I guess.
Sexual assault survivors.
Yeah, I mean the options are limitless.
And have the people on board are trained to deal with this with the emotional aspect of the people that are coming on board.
Yeah, I mean oftentimes we'll have a therapist, a PTSD therapist, but again there's no requirement that anybody talk. It's like here's. If you want to talk about anything, but what happens, I found, is people become friends on the boat and they share that bonding experience, and then they'll exchange phone numbers. Mm-hmm. And many times people have made friends on one of our boats. And, that's part of it is with PTSD and depression, you just often feel so isolated and alone. And to just know that you're not alone and there's other people going through similar things, it's just, for me, it's been hugely helpful. And sort of the feedback I've gotten in the past year and a half is that it's helped several people for sure.
It definitely takes you outside of yourself. When you're on, you feel the water hit your face, and there's so much to look at, and it smells good, and it's fun, and everybody's so nice. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's hard not to have fun and not to just appreciate the ocean and the wind. And you have a 50,000 pound boat being pushed at 8 knots through the water with nothing but wind. It's incredible to see how human ingenuity has been able to harness just nature for common good, I guess.
I talked to my dad this morning, and I was telling him all about it, and I sent him the pictures from yesterday, and he was asking a million questions. He was so excited. He was like a little boy. It was really cute.
Aw.
Yeah. He was asking all sorts of stuff. He said, so did you use the engine or was it the sail? I said, no, it was the sail. And he said, that's so cool. It was really sweet. He said, did you get seasick? Because he gets seasick. And I said, not at all. I was fine.
Good.
I did fall down once, but I got back up.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
How do you raise money to help pay for everything?
It's all donation based, so I've sort of been self-funding it while I work out the kinks. But Yeah, now I'm looking. I need to make it sustainable. So
how can people donate?
They can go to the website seavalor.org, and there's a donate button. Or so that's probably the easiest way. And anything would be appreciated.
Absolutely, it's a great program. What are you heading toward? You said to the global, or well, at least in the United States, of the boats that people have that all over the place. But where are you heading?
So I want to continue to grow this, but also sort of at the same time, I want to reach out to our elected politicians and leaders of industry and people that have the resources and the ability to sort of address this PTSD issue on a larger scale and say, look, I'm one person, this is what I'm trying to do. I sold my house, bought the boat, and now I take people sailing, and maybe it's going to help 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, I don't know, but at least it's something. What are you doing as our elected politicians other than fighting amongst each other and wasting billions of dollars? Because they really they should feel shamed about it. And it's not okay. I mean, I think I told you last night, but I was in Colorado 2 weeks ago, and I had lunch with my friend Steve. He's a Denver firefighter, and he was all upset because earlier that week, one of his fellow firefighters, a female firefighter, I think she was in her mid-30s, hung herself because of PTSD. And nobody saw the signs. I mean, she had just purchased a house and adopted a dog, and everybody thought she was fine, but somehow she slipped through the cracks and she hung herself. And so not only is her entire family devastated, but the entire fire department, which then trickles down and affects the entire community. So what could have been done to help her? So not an hour after I had lunch with Steve, I went and I had a beer with my friend Kristen, who's a West Point graduate that I've met out here through mutual friends. She's been sailing a bunch, and she has PTSD from her deployments in Iraq and just sort of the awful things she's experienced. But that same week, one of her fellow West Point graduates from her class hung herself. So I mean, within a 20-mile radius in the same week, you got a firefighter hang themselves and then a West Point graduate hang themselves, and that's not okay. I have another friend of a friend, this guy Keith, and he was an extremely highly decorated. He started out as an Army helicopter pilot and then transferred to be an Air Force pararescue helicopter pilot. And this is a guy that movies are made about. I mean, he would fly in and evacuate wounded soldiers when nobody else would. I mean, if there was horrible visibility or if they were taking heavy fire, I mean, he was the guy that would go in and rescue people. And he experienced things that just he wasn't able to I guess deal with. And then he killed himself last year. He shot himself. And so the fact that the country's not outraged by that and talking about that, here's a guy as Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, saved who knows how many American lives, but somehow he slipped through the cracks and wasn't able to get the help he needed and ends up shooting himself and leaving young kids without a dad. So it makes me so angry, and I feel that other people should be angry about this and figure out what needs to be done. Like, I don't pretend to have the answers. I just know that something needs to be done.
Are you going to go up on the hill and?
Oh yeah. So that's part of it, and I have some ideas planned for sort of the 20th anniversary. But for right now, it's just I'm doing what I can with my 2 boats, and trying to, like I said, expand it and grow it.
I think you bring up a really important point too about what depression looks like, and that I think maybe it's through TV or movies or something. It looks like people in bed all day, sobbing into their pillow, when in fact it's highly functioning depression.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks very normal.
It does, and unfortunately, there's still a huge stigma with mental health, and especially within the military, within the law enforcement community, within the fire department community. As if
it's a weakness, which it's not.
Exactly, it is. Yeah. It's seen as a weakness, and I understand that 100% because, for the first several years, I refused to accept that I was depressed. Like, I didn't want to hear it. I thought depression was something that my mom got. Because I didn't want to be stigmatized. I didn't want to admit that, I was weak because, I was feeling certain ways. And so that's part of it, is that stigma has to be broken down. If you go in a car crash and see people burning or, kids dying, and actually right here in Emeryville, there was a firefighter that killed himself a few months ago because he had seen, I think, a child die or something, and he wasn't able to figure out how to get past that. And so, what could have been done to help him? Is it therapy? Is it outreach? Is it support groups? Did he need time off? But people should be looking at these cases and saying, okay, is there a common thread? Is there something that the signs were there, and at this point somebody could have intervened that perhaps would have saved this person's life? And the truth is, there's never going to be something that's going to save everybody. There's just always going to be people that they've had enough, and enough's enough. But my goal, what if we could do something that would save 1% of the people through taking them out sailing, and take them hiking, fishing, skiing, support groups. There's got to be something. And even if you could save 1% of those people, I think that's a very worthy cause, and it would translate to hundreds of people a year.
Yeah, and to understand that a human's life is important, whether they're on the street or in a fancy house, or they're running in to rescue people, or they're teaching kids, or whatever it is, or pulling people out of an earthquake.
And 100%, every life is very important. Any suicide is tragic. For me in particular, when you have veterans where our country is sending people there, and they were totally fine before, in most cases, but because of what our country has asked them to do, and they've done it honorably, and then I feel like we just abandon them. Like, that's not okay. And same with police and fire. Like, these people are doing their jobs every day. They're hard jobs that it takes a certain mentality to be able to do that, and they do it.
We talk about that on this podcast a lot with many of my guests, and that the military sends people in to train them to become a hive of sometimes killers, or to function as, to go and do these tasks. And then when they come back, there's no, for lack of a better word, deprogramming. There's no 3 weeks of, we're going to put you in a spa, we're going to let you talk about everything you've seen, we're going to do our best to try and help find you at work and give you skills. And none of that I know there's Veterans Affairs, but it does not even begin to scratch the tip of the iceberg of the issue. And that's deplorable to me. It is.
And actually, one of what I'll consider sort of the first success stories, and I won't mention his name, but he was a sniper for 13 years. A friend of a friend referred him to me, and he started sailing. And throughout the course of his career, he did just things that any human would feel bad about. He shot a kid that was planning an IED. The kid was planning an IED, but he was an 11-year-old kid, and things like that. And so he and I were talking about it over lunch one day, and he did his job. His job was to save American lives. And so in his capacity as a sniper, he probably did. He probably saved hundreds, if not more, American lives. But then the toll on him for doing this has been horrible. Humans aren't designed to kill. It's not, and so he did his job because that was his job, and he had to do it. But he didn't want to be doing it. He did it because if he didn't, an IED was going to blow up a convoy or kill other Americans. But it's affected him, and when he got out of the military years ago, there just weren't the resources. Sure, the VA, et cetera, but he told me stories of calling the VA and being frustrated because he couldn't get an appointment for like 3 months. And they would hang up on him and say, "Sir, you need to calm down." And because he was upset, his voice was probably loud or something, and they would hang up on him. And so that can't happen. People in my mind, especially if you're a veteran, first responder, et cetera, there should be a 1-800 number where somebody can call and say, "Look, I need help." And then they have an advocate that can literally hold their hand through the entire process. So it's like, okay, well, you're not alone. What city are you in? Here's a therapist. Like, we'll worry about the insurance later. Here's some support groups. I'm going to check on you tomorrow, etc. And as far as I know, there's really nothing like that, because certainly I'm not aware of it. And if there is something like that, it hasn't been publicized enough where, right now I could call a 1-800 number and say, "Yep, enough's enough. Like, help me down the path of improved mental health and working through my PTSD. So, there really should be something like that. But this guy I was telling you about, I mean, he's doing better now, and I like to think that sailing, he became part of the crew, and he just found being out on the water extremely therapeutic, and sort of becoming friends with others of us that have, and so I mean he ended up cutting back on the drinking a lot, and he's now been able to hold a job for almost a year, which is something he wasn't able to do before. So I mean, things are looking a lot better for him now than they were a year and a half ago.
And just being able to look into someone else's eyes and say, I see you and you understand me, because you have it too, you have this issue too on some degree, is everything.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with being on the boats. I mean, 4 or 5 hours isn't going to cure 20 years of PTSD or whatever, but sometimes just having one good day and reminding people that they can feel happy again, they can feel an adrenaline rush and excitement, and when we saw those 20 dolphins jumping out of the water yesterday, I mean, those are positive, healthy, happy things. And so sometimes just having 4 or 5 hours and meeting good people, I mean, it can be enough to sort of stop that downward spiral. And that's the hope, that with the sailing, I mean, it's not going to cure anybody, but it might be enough to sort of help stop or slow that downward spiral. And then, I mean, I have another friend, he was ex-Navy SEAL, same thing, a lot of issues with things he's done in his life, and he started sailing, loved it so much that he actually bought a small 27-foot sailboat, and now he's teaching himself to sail. So I mean, that's encouraging. You see, and same thing, he was deep into alcoholism, sort of had isolated himself, and now through sailing, he's part of this community. He's now a sailor, and he can talk about sailboats, and people help him, with his boat and stuff. So that's kind of the hope. And it can't be just one thing. There has to be a multi-pronged approach of treating this. It has to be starting with leadership, or the highest levels. Really, the president of the United States should be upset every time somebody kills himself, but especially a veteran. Every time a veteran kills themselves, the president of the United States should be writing a letter to their families, apologizing for letting them slip through the cracks. I mean, it's 22 letters a day that they should be writing, and they're not. And it just feels like our country's turned our backs on people that deserve to be treated better. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. Eric, if people want to donate, again, it's seavalor.org. And then is there any other places that you want to send people to? That I'll put links on heyhumanpodcast.com.
Yeah, I mean, I think the suicide prevention hotline would be a good one.
Yeah, I'll throw that up there for sure. And write your senators, write your representatives.
Yeah,
and tell
absolutely.
them that it's not okay, because the more people in government that are on the side of right will help.
Exactly, and tell them it's not okay, but then in the same letter, ask them what they're doing to get that number from 22 veterans a day down to 20. It's a very small percentage, but what are they actively doing?
Mm-hmm. And then down to 18, and then 16, and then keep on going.
Yeah, and these people should be held accountable. I mean, we put them in office; it's their job, and what are they doing? I don't know. I don't know of any current legislation that's in the works. I don't know of any funding that's in the works. I mean, no veteran, firefighter, healthcare worker, in my opinion, should ever have to struggle to get therapy or mental health care. It should just be a no-brainer. Oh, you need this? Here. Don't worry about paying for it. We're going to pay for it, because you've served our country. I would say housing
as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a whole other. They should get a car. They should get all sorts of fun things. Yeah, but and all that starts with good health,
stay alive,
physical and mental. So
stay alive. Yeah. Eric, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Love you. Bye.